It started with a chilling whisper. I was alone at home one evening, sitting in my living room, when I heard it, a soft, eerie voice calling my name from the hallway. My heart skipped a beat as I turned around, expecting to see someone standing there. But no one was in sight. The house was eerily quiet, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't a figment of my imagination. I knew what I heard, and I wasn't alone. That night marked the beginning of a terrifying chapter in my life. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a wind or maybe my mind playing tricks on me. But as days passed, strange things began to happen. Objects would move when no one was around. I would wake up to find my bedroom door wide open, even though I always closed it before bed. These were subtle signs, but they were enough to make me realize something wasn't right. I decided to do some research on the house, hoping to find an explanation. The house I lived in was old, over a century old, to be exact. It had a rich history, one that I had no idea about when I moved in. As I dug deeper into the house's past, I uncovered something disturbing. The previous owner had mysteriously disappeared years ago. There were rumors that the house was cursed, but no one could say for sure. The more I learned, the more I felt a connection to the presence in my home. Was it the spirit of the missing owner, or something far darker? The more I researched, the more I realized that this was no coincidence. My experience wasn't unique. Other people who had lived in the house before me reported similar paranormal encounters. Some said they heard footsteps at night, while others claimed to see shadows moving in the corners of their vision. But none of them stayed long enough to find out what was really going on. I, however, was determined to uncover the truth. Little did I know that the more I learned, the more dangerous things would become. One night, as I sat reading in the living room, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. I looked up, startled by the chill that had filled the air. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone standing in the doorway, but there was nothing, only the dark, oppressive silence of the house. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the coldness vanished. But that feeling of being watched stayed with me. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard faint footsteps outside my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the sound grew louder, closer. I froze, unable to move, as I listened to the soft thuds of footsteps just outside the room. I wanted to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. It was as though something was toying with me, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. When I finally gathered the courage to open the door, there was no one there, but I knew, deep down, that whatever it was not human. As the weeks passed, the occurrences in the house grew more intense. I began to see shadows, dark, indistinct shapes that seemed to move just beyond my line of sight. They would dart across rooms, disappearing into the walls before I could focus on them. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but it became clear that something was in the house with me. Something that didn't want to be seen fully. One evening, while watching TV, I saw a shadow cross the room. It was no ordinary shadow. It had substance, a form that wasn't bound by the limitations of light. It lingered near the corner of the room before quickly vanishing. My heart raced, and my mind screamed for me to leave the house, but I couldn't. I was trapped. The presence in the house was growing stronger, and there was no way to escape it. No matter what I did, the shadows always followed. The first time I experienced an object moving on its own, I thought it was a fluke. I had set my keys on the kitchen counter and stepped into the next room. When I returned, they were gone. I searched everywhere, convinced I had simply misplaced them, but they weren't anywhere to be found. A few days later, my keys turned up in the exact same spot where I had originally left them. But they weren't just sitting there. Now, they were arranged in a perfectly straight line, as though someone had deliberately placed them that way. I wasn't the only one who experienced these strange occurrences. My friends, who had visited the house on several occasions, began to notice the odd happenings too. One of them swore they saw a cup slide across the table on its own. Another heard footsteps behind them when no one was around. I began to wonder, was this house haunted by a spirit? Or was there something far more sinister at play? There were places in the house where the temperature would drop suddenly and dramatically. It wasn't just a slight chill, it was as if the very air had become ice cold. I started keeping a blanket nearby to shield myself from the cold spots, but they would appear unpredictably. Sometimes, I'd be sitting in the living room, and out of nowhere, the air would turn frigid. I'd pull my blanket around me and shiver, knowing that something was causing it. I learned to avoid the areas where these cold spots appeared, but even that didn't work. One night, as I sat on my bed, the temperature in the room dropped so suddenly that I could see my breath. I looked around, expecting to see a draft-open window, but nothing was out of the ordinary. I quickly covered myself with a blanket, but the coldness only intensified. It was as if the house itself had turned against me. I felt like a guest in my own home. It wasn't just the cold that haunted me. The footsteps, always soft but deliberate, were impossible to ignore. They came at all hours of the night, sometimes in the hallway, other times in the attic. At first, I convinced myself that it was just the house settling. But the longer it went on, the less plausible that explanation became. These footsteps weren't the sounds of a creaky old house. They were deliberate, as if someone was walking through the halls, waiting for me to hear them. The footsteps became a nightly occurrence. I'd lie awake in bed, listening to the steady rhythm of steps echoing through the house. It felt like they were getting closer, moving from one room to the next. I even tried to confront the sound, walking down the hall to investigate, but every time I did, the footsteps stopped. It was as if the presence knew I was coming and was only taunting me. The fear was palpable, and I began to wonder if I was slowly losing my mind. One evening, I was cleaning the house when I came across an old mirror in the attic. It was a beautiful antique, with ornate golden framing and a thick layer of dust. I decided to bring it downstairs, thinking it might add character to my living room. The moment I placed it on the wall, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. I couldn't explain it, but something about that mirror felt wrong. That night, as I passed by the mirror, I caught a glimpse of something in the reflection. It was only for a second, but I saw it clearly, a shadowy figure standing behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest as I quickly covered the mirror with a sheet. I couldn't bring myself to look at it again, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was in that mirror was connected to the presence in the house. One rainy night, I was sitting by the fire, trying to block out the growing unease in my mind, when I heard a knock at the door. At first, I thought it was a delivery or a neighbor, but when I opened the door, no one was there. The only thing I saw was a dark, empty street outside. I looked up and down the road, but there was no sign of anyone. I quickly shut the door, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But as I turned away from the door, I heard another knock, this time coming from the window. I froze, my blood running cold. I had no idea who or what was trying to get in, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. The knocking continued, relentless and eerie, until I could no longer stand it. I locked all the doors and windows and sat in the dark, waiting for whatever it was to reveal itself. The attic had always been a place I avoided. It was dark, cluttered with old furniture, and smelled musty. But one night, I heard a sound coming from above. It wasn't the usual creaks or thumps that came from an old house. It was something else, an unmistakable shuffling noise, like someone was moving around up there. I couldn't ignore it any longer. With a flashlight in hand, I cautiously made my way up the creaky stairs to the attic. What I found up there sent chills through my body. There, in the corner of the room, was an old trunk, one I had never seen before. It was covered in dust and cobwebs, but it was a strange symbol carved into its side that caught my attention. I tried to open it, but the lid wouldn't budge. That's when I heard it, the sound of someone whispering my name from inside the trunk. I froze, unable to move. Something was trapped in that attic, and it was trying to get out. I had been hearing whispers for weeks, but one night, the whispers turned into a clear voice. It was soft, almost gentle, but unmistakable. It called my name, again and again, until I could no longer ignore it. This time, the voice wasn't coming from behind me or the walls. It was coming from the attic. I had to know who or what was trying to reach me. I gathered my courage and went back to the attic. The trunk was still there, but now, it felt different. The air was thick with an eerie energy. As I approached the trunk, I heard the voice again, clearer than before. "Help me," it whispered. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. and I knew that the ghost, or whatever was haunting this house, needed something from me. But what? And why? The answers were just beyond my reach. But the closer I got, the more the house seemed to resist. I couldn't shake the feeling that the ghost in my house was connected to the disappearance of the former owner. Determined to uncover the truth, I tracked down the last known relative of the missing person. What I learned shocked me to my core. The previous owner hadn't just disappeared. They had been the victim of a tragic crime, one that had been covered up for years. It seemed the house had a dark secret, one that no one was willing to talk about. With this new information, I returned to the house, hoping to make contact with the spirit. I knew it wasn't just a random haunting. It was something far more sinister. As I stood in the attic, the temperature dropped, and I felt the presence of the ghost grow stronger. It was as if the spirit was trying to tell me something. I had to listen. Armed with the truth about the house's dark past, I decided to confront the spirit. I set up a seance, hoping to communicate with whatever was haunting the place. As I sat in the center of the living room, the temperature dropped again, and I felt a cold wind sweep through the room. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a shadowy figure appeared before me. The figure spoke, its voice like a faint whisper in the wind. "I am trapped. Help me find peace." It was the voice of the former owner, and I knew I had to do something to help them move on. But how? The answer was not easy to come by, and I feared that solving the mystery would come at a high price. With the haunting growing more intense, I realized I had to act fast. I researched ways to cleanse the house, reaching out to experts in paranormal phenomena. I gathered the necessary tools, prepared for the final confrontation with the ghost, and waited for the moment when the spirit would reveal its deepest secrets. That night, as the full moon illuminated the house, I entered the attic one last time. This was a place where the mystery had started, and this was where it would end. The spirit's presence was stronger than ever, and as I spoke the words of the ritual, I felt the house tremble around me. The air was thick with tension. Would this be the moment the spirit found peace, or would I become trapped forever in the haunting? As the ritual ended, I felt the weight of the haunting lift. The temperature returned to normal, and the house no longer felt oppressive. The ghost had found peace, and with it, I found a sense of closure. The strange occurrences stopped, and for the first time in months, I felt safe in my own home. The house was still old, its history forever etched in the walls, but it no longer felt like a prison. The shadow that had haunted me was gone. I had faced the unknown, confronted the spirit, and emerged stronger for it. I will never forget the ghost that lived in my house, but I am grateful that it is now at rest, allowing me to finally live in peace. This story is brought to you by Harmony Publishing, who is one of the top self-publishing companies out there. They make publishing easy, professional, and affordable. Just check the description for more information about them.